So this is an example of what we're going to be doing next. This is an example by Lisa Rigsby that's almost done. But we're going to be using watercolor techniques that we used in the last project, the watercolor gem. And this one's going to be based on a silhouette. Now, if you look at this, you can see the background design, but you can also see that there's the image of a bird, kind of the outline of a bird. You don't have a lot of the details on the inside, like you can't see exactly where the wing is. So a silhouette is just an outline of something. If you look at this printout, each one of these is the image of a bird. You can see the outline of it, but the entire inside has been filled in black. That is a silhouette. You don't get the details on the inside, but you get a very detailed outline of the very outside shape of whatever it is that the silhouette is of. My examples are going to be of animals, but you don't have to create an animal. It can be a person, it could be a thing. I've had somebody in the past use the silhouette of the Disney castle, and that's okay as long as that silhouette is recognizable. So here is an example of this project getting started. You can see the very pencil outline of the outside shape of the bird, and then on the inside what you're going to be doing is creating patterns. And so you've got repetition of things. So you've got a repetition of these small little circles, a repetition of larger circles. You know, you have other larger shapes to help fill in the space, and you can see how that continues to really fill it in. Here's another example that doesn't have a background, but the inside of this cat is very well done. You can see here the pattern is little dots and then a big kind of stripe to fill in the spaces throughout the whole tail. And then you have a repetition of this paisley shape with repetition on top of that of little dots to fill that in. And you can see this paisley is repeated again here and here and here and here and here and here to help fill in the space. Now this person did decide to go in and kind of fill in some of these inside details, like you get the ear and some eyes and nose and, you know, where the whiskers form. And that's okay, but you don't have to do any of the detail on the inside if you don't want to. So how do you get started? The first thing I would do is figure out what it is that you want to use as your silhouette. I would type that in to your search engine and add the word silhouette to the end of that and see what you get. That'll give you a lot of images to work from. And at that point, you can do three things. You can, if you want, you can print it out. Now I've decided to use Godzilla for mine. And so I have gone ahead and printed out my silhouette, but let me really emphasize that if you are going to print yours out, you need to make sure you enlarge that image as big as you can on this piece of paper, because the piece of paper we're using is even bigger than an 8.5 by 11. And if you have a small image, it's going to be tiny on your piece of paper and you're going to have way too much background space. So if you do print it out, make sure you blow it up so that you barely have any room left on the edges, as big as you can. If you choose to print yours out, you can transfer it by taking your image, placing it behind your watercolor paper, putting it up on the window and tracing it, just like we did with one of the colored pencil drawings. Okay, that's one way to transfer it. You can also take your printout and rub graphite all over the back of your image, all over the whole thing. Flip it over and trace it so that that graphite on the back comes out on your paper, just like we did in that same project with the colored pencil. Okay, so those are two methods of getting this on the paper. If you choose not to print this out or you're not able to, that's totally fine. You can just reference your Silhouette on your computer and look at it and just draw it. You can draw it out freehand on your paper, which is perfectly fine. Perfectly fine. And that actually will teach you how to draw even a little bit better than just tracing something. So get your image on there. So when I drew my outline, I pressed down kind of hard so that you can see it in the video. Just like before in our last project, I don't want you to do that. I want you to draw very lightly so that you can see it, but that it's light enough so you can erase it in the end, because you don't want to see that pencil when we're all through. We're going to erase it. So, all right, so now we're ready to watercolor, and there's a few things that you need to keep in mind. One is, what kind of color combination are you going to use? You can use all the colors, that's fine. But looking at who I have Godzilla, and I kind of want to stay in his color range. So I'm probably going to be using blues, greens, maybe a little yellow, and just kind of keeping it in that sort of range. The other thing is that these areas where I have a lot of detail, especially in here where his spikes on his spine are, I'm going to have to make sure I watercolor all up in there. You know, as we do this, like we did in our gem project, we're going to be leaving a little bit of space in between our shapes. And some areas like out here, you might have white spaces where you don't have watercolor coming all the way out to the edge, and that's fine. But if you have something detailed like this, if you leave a lot of space, you're going to lose that detail. So if you have a good detail area, make sure you're coming all the way out to fill in the space around the edges so that you can see all of that detail. So when you look at some of these colors, especially in here, I've got different kinds of greens. I've got some blue greens and some yellow greens. And so there's a way to mix colors in your paint palette. Let me show you a few tricks that you can do with your paint palette. One is, say you get a lot of color of one color into another and you want to clean it out. You can get your fingernail up underneath the edge of this, and these actually pop out. You can take this to the sink, lightly rinse it under water. You can use your paintbrush as that happens to kind of clean it out, and you can pop that back. Also, this top part, the lid, is a tray that you can use to mix colors. So say you want to make a lighter green, kind of a lime green. What I would do is start with the lighter color, which, you know, it would be yellow and green. I'm going to start with my yellow, and I'm going to grab some of that and put it up here in my tray. I'm going to clean my paintbrush off. Then I'm going to go back in, grab a little bit of green, and then I'm going to mix that up here. So you can see I can use this to get different colors. And then when you're all finished, this is going to get kind of gross with all kinds of colors. And so it's good to know that this part actually pops off. You can take this, wash it under the sink, get it all clean, and then pop it back in. All right, so far I have my Godzilla silhouette completed. I've filled it in with organic shapes, and I kind of went with, you know, he's got a lot of scales, so I did some things that kind of represented scales, but it's pretty abstract. Now what I need to do is think about my background. So let's look at our first example again. In this one, you have a very regular straight edge that creates this kind of diamond pattern, kind of like a checkerboard, which is very doable for this project. It looks great. You can do something very simple like that. It could be circles, it could be stripes, it can be something very design based. With mine, I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm still going to stick with my straight edges. I'm going to use a straight edge to make all of my marks, but I think I'm going to do kind of like an abstract landscape in the back. I have to make sure I wait until everything is dry on him before I do that so I don't mess it up. But you know, I'm going to draw some straight lines for ground. I think I'm going to do some kind of zigzags for mountains, and then maybe, I don't know, some shapes up in the sky. Also, think about color when you do this. I have a lot of cool colors here in my silhouette, and so when I go to paint the background, I'm probably going to use a lot of more warm tones, maybe browns, maybe something that is different than my silhouette, so that the silhouette stands out. You don't want to do the same kind of colors because then they'll blend together. But you really want it to be able to stand out. So we're going to use contrast with our color. All right, so here's my final piece that, you know, it's okay. If I could go back and do it again, I think I should have divided this up into more spaces because there's a lot of white still in him. And I think these shapes are too big. I would have liked to have gone back and maybe made a few more shapes, but that's what art is about. You do one, you learn from it, you make another one, and it evolves and you get better and better and better. So the next time if I go to do a project like this again, I'm going to keep that in mind.